a film or tell a story. And so when you say these years and the amount of people that I've met.
Most people think they know Keanu Reeves, the calm one, the humble one, the man who somehow survived fame without letting it corrupt him. But what almost no one realizes is that behind that silence sits a list, one he never wanted to talk about, one built from betrayal, chaos, and moments he could never forget. And after decades of staying quiet, Keanu finally let the truth slip. There are 6 Hollywood giants he refuses to forgive, and the reasons behind each one are far darker than anyone ever imagined. He carried a storm with him everywhere he went. Producers whispered about his temper. Crew members braced for his outbursts. And Keanu, who believed the energy on set shaped everything, saw Baldwin as the exact opposite of what an actor should be. Everything changed in 2003. During a private industry roundtable, Baldwin suddenly snapped at a director who criticized him. The entire room froze. Baldwin pointed at the actors around him and barked, "Some of you don't even deserve to be in this room." Then he locked eyes with Keanu. For most actors, that moment would have been about pride or ego. For Keanu, it was about something deeper, respect. Being publicly singled out, not for talent, but for someone else's anger, was the kind of contempt he never forgot. He finally hinted at the truth years later in a quiet Japanese interview. He didn't name the person, but his words were unmistakable. Once someone shows you contempt, you don't forget it. Everyone in the industry knew exactly who he meant. And then Baldwin's controversies began spiraling. Physical altercations, legal battles, on-set explosions, and later, the tragedy on the set of Rust, which only confirmed what Keanu had sensed from the beginning. Chaos wasn't random for Baldwin. It was a pattern, a dangerous one. Keanu eventually told a producer, "Chaos isn't talent. Chaos destroys talent." That sentence became the invisible line that closed the door forever. Since then, every attempt to pair them in a film has quietly died. Keanu refuses without explanation. They don't speak at events, don't appear in the same photos, and don't even offer a polite nod when they pass each other. For Keanu, Baldwin wasn't just someone he didn't get along with. He was the one man who showed him a kind of disrespect he could never unsee. But Baldwin was only the beginning, because the next clash didn't come from ego or arrogance. It came from someone who mistook chaos for creativity and pushed Keanu's patience to its limit.
It snapped into place the moment their personalities collided. Where Keanu moved with calm focus, Shia carried a restless charge that filled every room he entered. Their first encounter happened during a studio workshop in the mid-2000s. While veteran actors discussed character work, Shia interrupted with a loud joke about how Hollywood had become too stiff for real creativity. Laughter rippled through the room, but Keanu didn't join in. He watched quietly, the way he always did when someone mistook noise for depth. Afterward, Keanu leaned to a producer and said softly, "He confuses disruption with meaning." It wasn't anger, just disappointment, but it marked the start of a distance neither of them would ever close. The real break came 2 years later at a charity event. Shia arrived in full performance mode energy, turning the gathering into something between a skit and a spectacle. When he spotted Keanu standing off to the side, he blurted out a teasing quip about him being the most zen robot in the room. People laughed because they didn't know what else to do. Keanu didn't. He simply looked at him and said, "Cruelty isn't honesty, it's insecurity." Then he walked out. For someone as patient as Keanu, that moment spoke louder than anger ever could. From that point on, the distance became permanent. Whenever studios floated the idea of pairing them, Keanu declined with the same quiet line, "Not a healthy environment." No arguments, no public drama, just a closed door. They didn't greet each other at premieres, didn't trade polite nods at industry events, didn't pretend a bridge still existed. Keanu had seen enough, and once he drew that line, he didn't cross it again. But Shia's chaos was only one kind of storm. The next actor on Keanu's list wasn't wild or reckless. He was intense in a way that blurred the line between artistry and danger. And that was where Keanu finally found the one.
If Shia LaBeouf brought unpredictability, Jared Leto brought something far more intense, an energy so sharp and all-consuming that it shifted the atmosphere of every room. And for Keanu Reeves, that was the moment caution turned into something deeper, distrust. Their paths didn't collide on a film set, but through the stories whispered by the people who had. Crew members described the same pattern: immersive performances that pushed past the edge of comfort, method experiments that bled into real life, and a level of commitment that left even unseasoned professionals on guard. Some actors found it fascinating. Keanu didn't. He believed art should elevate people, not unsettle them. After hearing one story too many, Keanu's reaction was quiet but firm. "You can't harm people in the name of art," he said. It wasn't judgment, it was a boundary, a line he never crossed, even in his darkest, most demanding roles. That line was put to the test in 2011 during a private casting meeting for a psychological thriller. A director floated an idea, Keanu and Leto sharing the screen as two characters spiraling into madness together. Before the pitch even landed, Keanu let out a slow exhale. Then, for one of the only times in his career, he cut someone mid-sentence. "Chaos isn't a technique, it's a warning," he said. Those words were enough. The room went silent. The suggestion died instantly. No argument, no debate. Everyone understood. Some actors were unpredictable. Jared was combustible, and that was a world Keanu refused to step into. As the years passed, the divide only deepened. Leto's reputation for extreme preparation grew, and Keanu's quiet refusals continued. Whenever studios proposed a project involving the two, his answer never changed. No press statements, no shade, just absence, a firm, unmoving distance. And so they became two actors orbiting opposite ends of Hollywood, one fueled by intensity, the other grounded and calm. They crossed paths at award shows, but exchanged no words, no handshake, not even a glance. It wasn't anger, it wasn't rivalry. It was Keanu protecting the space that allowed him and the people around him to work without fear. But the next clash wasn't about chaos or danger. It was about ego, raw, unapologetic ego colliding head-on with Keanu's quiet.
Was the only actor whose reputation reached Keanu Reeves long before they ever stood in the same room. People whispered about his brilliance, his intensity, and the fire he carried into every project. They also warned him about the other part, the sharp edges, the ego, the forcefulness that could turn a calm set into a battlefield. Keanu listened, but he didn't judge, not until he saw it for himself. Their first indirect collision happened in the early 90s when both were being considered for similar roles. Kilmer reportedly watched Keanu's audition tape and offered a blunt critique to the room. "He's too simple. Acting needs fire, not stillness." Most actors would have snapped back. Keanu didn't, but he remembered. Not because it hurt him, but because it revealed exactly how differently the two men saw the craft. What truly changed everything came during a studio dinner in 1995. Kilmer was frustrated with the lighting setup, insisting the cinematographer wasn't capturing him like a legend. The tension kept rising, and Keanu, quiet as always, finally stepped in to calm the situation. But Kilmer spun around and shot him a glare. "Don't play wise monk with me." The room went silent. Keanu didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. He just looked at Kilmer for a long moment and said something so soft that only the people closest heard it. "You don't belittle the people you depend on." It wasn't anger, it was disappointment, the kind that doesn't explode but settles in permanently. After that night, something shifted. Casting teams pitched ideas pairing the two together, convinced that mixing Kilmer's fire with Keanu's stillness would create magic. But Keanu declined every time, without explanation, not out of bitterness, but because he didn't trust the environment that came with Kilmer's intensity. Whenever they crossed paths at premieres or ceremonies, they didn't exchange insults or fake smiles. They simply walked past one another, two actors with nothing left to say. For Keanu, the door had closed, quietly, completely, and without drama. But the next clash wasn't about ego or artistic philosophy. It wasn't even about anger. It was about survival, because the next person on Keanu's list carried a kind of unpredictable.
Sean Young was the only person on Keanu Reeves' list whose presence didn't provoke anger, just exhaustion. With everyone else, the tension came from clashing philosophies or explosive egos. But with Sean, it was different. She carried a storm with her, one that swept through rooms before anyone had time to brace themselves. And Keanu, who protected his peace more than anything, recognized instantly that this was a storm he could never stand close to. Their first encounter happened back in 1989 during an industry rehearsal for a project both were loosely attached to. Keanu arrived early, quiet, prepared, focused. Sean arrived late, pushed the door open hard enough to shake the wall, slammed her script onto the table, and immediately accused the director of playing favorites. The entire room shifted. A calm rehearsal became chaos in seconds. Keanu didn't say a word, but he watched the scene unfold with that still, observant expression he became famous for. In less than 3 minutes, he understood the kind of energy she brought with her, and it unsettled him. But the real breaking point came in 1994. Both actors were shortlisted for the same studio project, and during a casting session, tension erupted again. After another actress finished a heartfelt reading, Shawn rolled her eyes, scoffed, and mocked the performance in front of everyone. Then she turned to Keanu with a smirk and said, "This business loves quiet boys like you. They're easy to control." Keanu didn't respond. He simply closed his notebook, stood up, and walked out of the room. That night, he confided in a colleague, speaking more openly than usual. Cruelty, disguised as confidence, is still cruelty. It was one of the rare moments he allowed frustration to show. As the years passed, Sean Young's behavior became more unpredictable. Public meltdowns, confrontational outbursts at events, rumors of showing up uninvited to sets, accusations tossed like grenades. Everywhere she went, there was noise, confusion, conflict, and Keanu avoided noise more than any actor.
There was one final name on Keanu Reeves' list, but unlike the actors before, men and women whose storms played out in public, this one operated in the shadows, a studio executive, powerful, respected, feared by some, admired by others. And unlike every rivalry before, this one didn't begin with ego, chaos, or reckless behavior. It started with something far more personal. This executive, known in industry circles simply as the architect, had built a reputation for sculpting careers the way a puppeteer pulls strings. For years, he had tried to shape Keanu's career in the same way, pushing him toward darker roles, edgier choices, aggressive reinventions. But Keanu resisted every attempt. He wasn't chasing fame. He wasn't chasing shock value. He just wanted to tell stories honestly, without manipulation. At first, the disagreements were small. Rejected scripts, declined rewrites, polite refusals. But the architect didn't take rejection quietly. Slowly, the tension grew into something heavier. Subtle comments at industry dinners, whispered critiques to producers, and a nearly constant pressure for Keanu to abandon the quiet, centered identity he had built. The breaking point came during a meeting in the early 2000s when the architect tried one final push. He presented a role that leaned into everything Keanu rejected: violence for the sake of spectacle, darkness without purpose. When Keanu hesitated, the executive leaned forward and said the one sentence that changed everything: "Your stillness is holding you back. If you don't evolve, I'll find someone who will." The room froze. It wasn't a threat. It was a reminder of how easily Hollywood could erase people who didn't bend. Keanu looked him in the eyes and gave a quiet answer that ended the relationship forever. "I'd rather disappear on my own terms than succeed on yours." Those words traveled through the industry faster than any headline. And from that moment forward, Keanu and the architect became silent opponents. No confrontations, no public feud, just two people moving in opposite directions. One building careers through control, the other walking away from anything that smelled like manipulation. The aftermath was telling. Projects involving the two of them never materialized. Opportunities faded. Meetings stopped. But Keanu didn't care. In fact, stepping away from that influence allowed him to find the roles that defined him, the ones driven by heart, discipline, and integrity rather than spectacle. And even today, when insiders talk about Keanu's quiet list of people he'll never work with again, the architect's name is the one spoken only behind closed doors. Not out of fear, but because Keanu never needed to expose him. He simply cut the cord and never looked back. And with that final break, Keanu learned a truth that most actors never discover. Sometimes the most dangerous rival isn't the loudest person in the room, but the quiet force pulling strings.
When you look at all 6 names together, a pattern appears, one most people never associate with Keanu Reeves. These weren't petty rivalries or dramatic feuds. They were warnings. Each one revealed a side of Hollywood that rarely makes it onto magazine covers. Egos that implode, artists who lose control, storms that sweep through sets, and power players who operate quietly in the shadows. And through it all, Keanu stood exactly where he always does: calm, centered, and unwilling to trade his integrity for a role, a headline, or anyone's approval. Most actors spend their lives trying to survive Hollywood, but Keanu learned something different. He learned how to walk away, how to protect his peace, how to choose the people who bring stability instead of chaos. And that's why these rivalries mattered, not because of the conflicts themselves, but because of what they taught him about trust, boundaries, and the price of staying true to who you are in an industry that constantly tries to reshape you. So now the real question is yours. Were these clashes justified, or do they expose a deeper truth about the world behind the cameras, one none of us ever truly see? Let me know in the comments whose story surprised you the most. And if you want more hidden Hollywood stories just like this, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because there's always another secret waiting right behind the curtain.